was nice. Really got in there. Hello, Hoops
Hey,
heads.
everybody.
And welcome to the Double Dribble NBA show. I am your host, Jimmy Carlton, and joining me, as he always does, is a man who,
genuinely do.
for some reason, is not rocking his man bun. I can only presume it's because after last night's performance, Kelly Olynyk is now the man bun goat. It is Mitch Baumhoff.
I mean, I've said this regularly, and I'll say it again. Kelly Olynyk can always catch these hands. But yeah, I can't.
You have threatened Kelly Olynyk multiple times offset, so that is true.
And publicly, listen, follow me on Twitter, @MitchVomhoff, for all your Kelly Olynyk slander needs. Because you can find them there. But yes, no, I have, as with many great sports records, you know, the streak had to come to an end.
Yeah.
You know, we had a great 6 weeks with the Man Bun live on the internet here on Facebook, YouTube, Spreaker.com. But as with all good things, you know, we had to change it up a little bit.
Records were made to be broken, hair was made to be cut.
Exactly. And
The Warriors and the Cavaliers were made to be in the NBA Finals.
It was destiny.
Yeah.
It really was.
These are the rules of the universe.
Indeed.
I just want to give a reminder that we are broadcasting on Facebook Live, on Spreaker, on YouTube. You can watch us anywhere on those three mediums.
Indeed.
And potentially very many other places in the future. So we've got a couple of questions of the day today.
Yes.
And we're going to get into one of them a little bit more deeply later, which is who is the dirtiest player left in the NBA playoffs with the two conference finals now. We've got Zaza Pachulia. He's out there. Maybe we got a little Draymond Green. Probably
my
some,
nemesis, Kelly Olynyk.
There's probably going to be a couple J.R. Smith votes out there. But more importantly, this is something you wanted to talk about, Mitch.
So
Is the all black, wearing the all black, sort of going to the funeral outfit, dead? Is that overplayed?
Played
out officially.
So this is our secondary question of the week. You can answer either question of the week by commenting below if you're watching on Facebook. Drop us a comment. Let us know who your dirty player is. What you think about funeral outfits. And I came to you, Jimmy, before the show, and I said I need to talk about this. I need to get something off my chest. Because there obviously has been this trend a little bit of teams. It started off in the playoffs and migrated into the regular season a little bit, where teams will wear all black to a game to signify that they are ready to put their opponent to rest, to bury them, to attend their funeral, as you do for a real funeral. You wear dark clothes, you're very somber, you're very serious, and teams have tried to replicate that as maybe as motivation for themselves to spook their opponent, whatever. But I'm really concerned by this trend of it becoming popular for games like Game 6 with the
for games like every single time the Wizards play, essentially.
For games that the Wizards play.
We've seen the Celtics do it, we've seen the Hawks do it. It's becoming a little in vogue, right?
But particularly when the Celtics kind of half did it in Game 6. And A, didn't win the game, so listen, guys, come on. And B, after the game, just kind of like shook it off. It's like, oh, no, we totally didn't try to do that. It was just a coincidence that everybody wore black. And like, come on. If you're going to do the funeral bit, commit to the funeral bit. If you're not, just play the game, put your opponent away, and don't try to make a spectacle out of it, especially if you're going to back out when you don't come through.
Yeah, I think that the next evolution of this would have to be like, everybody showing up dressed in all black, but then also carry like wielding the scythe of death, right?
Oh, like in a hood.
Yeah,
like I showed up in a black robe and a hood.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd be able to get through security that way, but anyways, let us know if you think that's a played out trend. With the Wizards are gone, so perhaps it will come to an end. I can't imagine the Celtics being ballsy enough to try that with the Cavs.
I mean, they've been talking
a
fair amount of mess about how no one believes in the number one seed in the East in any of their series. So
right.
I wouldn't be surprised
why, right?
if some takes come flying out of certain mouths in green.
Yeah. Before we get to Celtics, Cavaliers, Warriors, Spurs, which is the talk of the town now, we want to do a little post-mortem, late arrests. Speaking of death, a couple of the conference semifinalists that are now departed and are gone from us. During our show last Tuesday, the Raptors and the Jazz had already made quick work of themselves and were already out, so we don't need to spend any time on them. But the Rockets and the Wizards obviously have now joined that group. So
yes,
we want to pour one out, not necessarily literally with our Milwaukee's finest.
Yeah,
peers.
we are shouting out. We didn't get to at the top of the show, but I do need to shout out to Milwaukee Brewing for the Hop Freak Double IPA. This is very tasty.
And I'm going to
we'll
shout
probably
out
have
Brenner
Sleep
Brewing.
soon.
But Rockets Game 6, James Harden didn't seem particularly interested in playing basketball that night, and the Rockets got smoked in an elimination game at home with the other team without their best player. Can you are a basketball junkie as much as I know anyone. Can you tell me why that happened, or what? Can you explain that?
Well, unfortunately, this might give a little credence to some known three-point detractors, such as Mr. Charles Barkley, some other old-school NBA players. But when you kind of base your game around a high-variance play like shooting a lot of threes, you could very well end up with a clunker like that. And, it was astounding, really, to see, James Harden not show up in a game where he didn't have to worry about Kawhi Leonard. This should have been his opportunity to go off, seal the deal, and move on to the conference finals. But we just kind of saw this amazing Spurs team that just always finds a way to do something crazy. If Kawhi goes down, Danny Green steps up. Jonathan Simmons, former D-leaguer, steps up and plays significant minutes.
Best story of the Spurs by
far.
Really
really incredible. Dejounte Murray, we talked about a little bit, is playing not necessarily regular minutes, but fairly significant minutes for a rookie.
Yeah,
on a playoff
Tony
team.
Parker, right?
When he replaced Tony Parker, Patty Mills has stepped up in a really amazing way, and so. On one hand, you could definitely kind of indemnify the Rockets and say, well, you didn't show up for this great, this is a very important game for you, obviously. But I think you also have to give a lot of credit to the Spurs, who, despite facing a bunch of injuries and having to rely on LaMarcus Aldridge in the playoffs, have really just continued to find ways to win. And
for those of us watching, like me, who have no idea what the word indemnify means, I just looked it up. It means to compensate someone for harm or loss. So thank you, Mitch, for introducing that word into our lexicon.
Hey, listen, I didn't go to English school for nothing.
Yeah, what struck me from that series, and we'll move on after this, is we've talked a lot about adjustments in the playoffs, and it's a very overdrawn, overwrought topic is adjustments, right? Like,
yes.
Which coaches and which teams make adjustments. The Rockets seem to do no more adjusting than, I guess we should shoot a lot more threes and hope that James Harden shows up to be the best player in the series. And he didn't do that, and they did shoot a lot more threes. And, like you said earlier, they did. That's how they chose to play. Yeah. And the Spurs ended up being the better coached, proved out that they were the better coached team that just had a lot more depth. What do you think Houston needs to do to be able to, I think we all sort of fell in love with the Rockets as this potential Warriors beater just because of the style they played and because of James Harden being MVP candidate. They really didn't have a lot of depth. They weren't necessarily any more talented than they were set up to be. A 5, a 6 seed type team. And I wonder what else they need to be able to be anything more than that in the West.
Yeah. I mean, so the moves they made at the trade deadline were very much, firepower focused.
Right.
We need
add more strength to strength.
We're going to add Lou Williams, and we're just really going to double down on shooting. And they do have a pretty solid rotation. Even when you get into some of their second string, they do have some pretty good players and a fairly good depth. I mean, obviously Nene getting hurt and being out for the season hurt them a lot.
Sure.
As far as putting a lot of stress on a young player in Clint Capella. If Nene comes back, Capella obviously is going to get better.
Is there a glaring hole? Is there a need that they have that can be that can be filled?
For the style of play that they use, and obviously the impetus to surround a big man with shooters, I think they're set up pretty well. You would maybe like to see a legitimate backup point guard behind Pat Beverly. Obviously that gets a little weird because Harden sometimes becomes the point guard, but you would like to see maybe another perimeter defender. Somebody who can pick up some of that slack when Beverly's off the court without making Harden cover a number one scorer. So you would definitely, it's tough to balance defense and shooting, especially when both of those are coveted in a single player in the league today. But that's the direction I would go if I was the Rockets.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to go to battle with James Harden as one of the top 4 players in the league or so, and just hope that he's going to do enough. And we've seen this now over the course of several different postseasons that he just doesn't always show up in the biggest games. Moving over to another, the Eastern Conference, another team that probably needs a little bit more depth. That was made extremely obvious with the Wizards. Bradley Beal played a great game 7. John Wall did not, but he typically does. And after that, they really didn't get much of anything.
Yeah.
What's the Wizards' future? Is that how do you surround John Wall with more talent? What else can they do to become a real challenger contender in the East?
Yeah, that one's a little bit more tough because there's a lot of money committed to some players in there. I mean, the combination of Jan Mahimi and Marcin Gortat is already set up to make $28 million next year, and to have two, Gortat's still a pretty good starting center in the league.
Yeah, Jan Mahimi going to make $16.6 million next year.
They committed a lot of money to a center who was very bad in Game 7, and I would not be excited about the prospects of bringing those guys back. But if they want to hang on to Otto Porter, he's going to be very expensive this offseason, even as a restricted free agent. They obviously have a super dynamic backcourt in Beal and Wall. Otto Porter is becoming a great shooter in the league. You would just like to see a younger center for them. They just, they've got older centers that aren't going to be pursuing guys on the perimeter, that aren't going to be moving well enough to defend a lot of the spread shooting teams in this league. And so there's already been some talk about Gortat kind of angling to find maybe greener pastures.
Yeah,
if they can unload him,
he's been as consistent and steady, a good soldier player for them for 4 or 5 years.
For sure. And if they can move him and not bring on too much more salary, then they get a little bit of flexibility. But the Wizards are going to have to be very careful in the next couple of years to avoid being strapped and unable to add more depth. Because, as we saw last night, having Brandon Jennings as your backup point guard doesn't really end well. And so there's not a lot to work with when John Wall has to sit.
Yeah. So and Bradley Beal, we don't know we don't know the interpersonal dynamics in that locker room, but certainly we've heard plenty between over the last couple of years of John Wall and Bradley Beal. More coexisting certainly more this year than in previous years, but they're definitely not best friends. And this year was the first year of Bradley Beal's new contract. He made $5-6 million more this year. He's going to make $5-6 million more next year. He's going to make $7 million more the year after that. There could be some other dynamics there that are problematic, and obviously they need to add more talent, have more depth. They didn't have a bench whatsoever. Do you think this was sort of the ceiling of what the Wizards can be? A second round team that wins 50 games during the season, but it's just hard to see them going further in the playoffs with this. Even if they add a couple of pieces with the way they're currently constructed.
Yeah. As constructed, unless they do make a pretty significant shift in the offseason. You always can bank on Brad Beal. He's still a young player, so could still certainly take another, maybe not a huge step, but an incremental step. Otto Porter is still young and could, obviously shot right around 40% for the year, which I don't think from 3, which I don't think he's going to improve that much, but could still become an even more versatile player. There is some room for growth, but I think they would really have to wait out, some of the other high-profile teams in the East. Wait for LeBron's Cavaliers to fall back a little bit. Maybe hope something happens in Boston and that crumbles a little bit for them to be a serious contender, not just kind of be that second tier wannabe, second round team that never quite gets it done.
Yeah. We alluded to this off the top, and this is one of our Facebook questions, or one of our questions of the day, on whatever platform you're watching, was who's the dirtiest player left in the conference finals, or left in the playoffs, which is a good enough segue into the other side, right? Zaza Pachulia.
Indeed. Zaza, my friend, my old Georgian friend.
Yeah, he spent some time here in Milwaukee. Kawhi Leonard is hurt again.
Yeah.
The question is it because of Zaza Pachulia? And then the sub-question is, was it intent or was it incidental? And, this just about everybody has chimed in from, obviously we've had Greg Popovich, who was pretty stirred up.
He was animated,
yeah,
let's say.
I said this earlier to Baxter when we were on a halftime. Greg Popovich, not usually a fan of answering questions reporters ask, but he really did want to spend some time talking about that one, didn't he?
Indeed.
and then we just had an absolute array of people, both on TNT, ESPN. Everybody's written a column about this, whether it was dirty, whether that's whether it was a closeout that was unnatural, blah blah blah. Real quick, did you have a problem with the way Zaza Pachulia defended that play? And then do you think his past, which is sort of a lumbering Eastern European big man, plays into this reputation that some people seem to say is dirty and others say it's just the way he is? Yeah,
so I was a little disheartened to see, people come out and condemn Zaza Pachulia as, this kind of enforcer type player who, like, he's just out there to hurt a dude. Right. Like, he doesn't, because
he looks like he'd be a dirty player. But that doesn't necessarily mean he should be condemned as one.
But I mean, there's not a great history of Zaza out there. Like, he will defend teammates and he will get into it if he has to, but there's not a tremendous history of him out there being a dirty player trying to injure people. And I think you could chalk a fair amount of what happened to, he's a big dude trying to close out on Kawhi Leonard. Big men in the league are, with exception, are not generally not the most graceful players.
Yeah.
And, it's, to me, it just it looked more like something that just happens during a game more than any kind of intent.
Yeah, it's interesting because at this level with these guys, they all know each other's weaknesses, right? And so Kawhi comes in with a bum ankle, a little bit of a lingering ankle injury. Everybody on the Warriors knows that. They know that's the one weakness that he's got. So there's an argument to be made that, which we've certainly seen this before in pro sports, that they're going after it a little bit. They're at least creating opportunities where he could exacerbate the injury. But on the other end, he's got this lingering ankle injury. These guys tape up their ankles to the max. Was it just a matter of time? And like we saw, a couple minutes later, he hurt it again, just sort of landing. So I thought it was interesting to hear Greg Popovich's comments, because I thought that was less an indication of what he thinks of Zaza Pachulia as a person or as a player, and less of an indictment of him really as a dirty player, and more an attempt, like David Fizdale with the Grizzlies, of sort of using a public platform to draw attention to something that he wants to make a big deal out of. So, he wants to maybe get a couple extra calls, so he's going to make this huge deal. He's so well respected. He's a revered coach in the league. And maybe now the referees pay a little more attention to it. Maybe the league pays a little more attention to it, throws a couple fouls the Spurs ways. I'm guessing there's more, there's layers there to Greg Popovich's comments beyond just him saying Zaza Pachulia was dirty and then comparing it sort of problematically to manslaughter, which those cross the sort of the war versus sports and the crime versus a basketball game comparisons are never really one and one.
I had some issues with the, like, I understood the intent of Pop's comment, obviously, of which literally was about intent, which was intent shouldn't matter, but.
I think it does if you're calling it into question a guy as a person.
There's probably a comparison to be made there that doesn't involve some sort of serious crime, and comparing a basketball game to literal loss of human life.
Does Kawhi play again in the series? And if so, when?
Oh boy. Well, having not yet completed my course of study in physical therapy, I cannot officially comment on Kawhi's injury.
Wait, are you not a doctor?
Did you think I was a doctor?
Yeah,
I did not approve that procedure.
I need you to take a look at something later.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll talk off air. But honestly, if the Spurs are still in this series, if they manage to take a game between 2 and 3, I don't see him coming back before like Game 4, because they tried the 1 game arrest thing. They gave him off of the last game against Houston. Brought him back for Game 1, where he was, he looked pretty much fine, but obviously re-aggravated the ankle a couple of times. He's obviously out for Game 2. I'm going to guess he's out for Game 3. And honestly, if the Spurs are down 3-0 and just facing elimination, it would not shock me if Pop just says, no, that we're just going to keep him out, like whatever, worry about next year. We're not going to win this series anyway, so what's the point?
Yeah. in that game one, that was one of the biggest comebacks in NBA playoff history.
Yeah.
They were down 23 at one point. There was the third biggest halftime deficit of 20. At one point, the Warriors had a win probability of 3%, and if you're anything like me, you probably are pretty sick of win probabilities, and we're all living in a matrix anyways. But,
it's all just numbers, man.
It's interesting that the Warriors are this team that is it by nature of having so much talent that they almost need a little bit of a kick in the pants or they almost need a 15-point deficit to be able to come back and start saying like, oh, we're going to flip the switch and now we're ready to win this game. They're on the verge of starting the postseason 10-0 for the first, want to be just the fifth team in NBA history to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And that was one of the things coming into the season was like the one of the two things that you could think of that might derail this Warriors team one was injury and one was complacency. Was just saying that we have these 4 All-Stars starting on our team. We have Kevin Durant, we have Steph Curry, we have Klay Thompson, we have Draymond Green. We have Zaza Pachulia, who has almost been an All-Star a couple times. Shout out Zaza. But yeah, there very much was this worry that they're just going to kind of take it easy and never get into a killer groove in time for the playoffs, and maybe see an upset at some point. I don't think we have to worry about that because we haven't seen much complacency in the playoffs yet. They are willing to just obliterate anyone in their path.
Yeah, it was just to put this into some context. There was a really good article in 538 about this very subject that people have been talking about, which is that it seems like they dig themselves into some pretty big holes. They've won an NBA best 20 games that they've trailed by 15 points or more at some point over the last 3 years.
It's remarkable.
That's 38% of the time that they've trailed by that many. And that's 4 times higher than than the league average over that time. So they're close to a 1 in 3, 2 in 4 times probability of winning those situations.
Yeah,
everybody else is 1 in 10.
Yeah, and that speaks to when you assemble this amazing group of talent, even if you do fall behind, even if something happens and falls off. They're one of the few teams that can just shoot themselves out of it,
Right, and in that vein, with so many All-Stars, so many All-NBA guys, is there one that you're anticipating being particularly bigger than the rest, or comparatively smaller than the rest of their Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, that sort of core 4, especially with guys like Andre Iguodala? We don't know whether he's going to play again much, over the next couple of games.
Pachulia out for game 2. For sure. But and then obviously maybe. So, before the series, I would have said probably this is Steph Curry's time to shine because if Kawhi Leonard is on the floor, he's probably going to be guarding Durant, which means Durant will still get his, but obviously when you have one of the best defenders in the league playing on you, then you expect your teammates to step up. But if Kawhi doesn't play, it's a free-for-all, man. It's just whoever gets those shots. And the Warriors are so good at seeking out the open man, seeking out the guy who can hit the shot. It's just whoever's going to get open, Klay Thompson is going to get his, even with Danny Green on him, I suspect, having to help off of him onto guys like Steph and Durant. Klay's going to get his. Draymond is going to do what Draymond does, hopefully with less kicking. But yeah, it's just going to be open season unless the Spurs really, and I praised the Spurs for this earlier about their ability to adjust to make the changes that are necessary, but I just don't see the adjustments you can make to defend a Golden State team like this. Yeah,
and I mean, the Warriors were minus 23 before Kawhi's injury, plus 25 after Kawhi's injury. Yeah. So I don't know. There's not much to dissect there other than you lost one of the best players in the league, and there's not a lot else around him.
You paid for it.
All right, switching over to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? One of these two teams,
those underdog Celtics, no one believes in them.
One of these two teams played yesterday. The other one hasn't played in 10 days. So there's a little bit of a rust situation for the Cavaliers. Maybe the Celtics are finding their groove, or no, are we warping the narrative, and this is just going to be another rout and series sweep, and the Cavaliers are going to be throwing balls off the backboard and drinking beers in the nosebleed section again.
I'm, after watching the way Boston kind of figured some stuff out, the way they had some guys like Mr. Canada, Kelly Olynyk. I believe this is official name now. It's weird they had to change it after last night.
Yeah, but, the white trashiest Canadian I can even imagine. I didn't know they had white trash guys up in Canada, but apparently
I've been to Canada. You can find all sorts of demographics up there. But I don't think this is going to be a sweep. I do think we're going to get 5 to 6 games out of it. ultimately, I do think Cleveland comes out ahead just because you bet on the team that has LeBron on it. You just always do. But I'm expecting a pretty good series. I think a rested up LeBron is the scariest thing that I would ever face in my life. If I was going to play against LeBron, I would want to make sure he has played a game every other day for the last month or so.
Yeah.
Because for the amount of effort and the amount of work he has to do, there was a really great article a year or two ago. I forget exactly where, and it's going to kill me that I can't credit it, but about his recovery process between games, and I think it was in a final series against the Warriors, and just for 48 hours, it's just entirely focused on let's get LeBron in all sorts of rehab, all sorts of whatever we can, just to get him to the next game.
Yeah.
And while he's still going to be great when he does that, I would much prefer that over LeBron, who's had 10 days to A, rest up, and B, think about how he's going to eviscerate your team.
Yeah. Yeah, LeBron had an interesting quote today that came out that he said he feels worse when he doesn't play. It strikes me
Must
as
be nice.
Yeah, I was going to say it strikes me as
happen to me.
The kind of thing that you say because there's no way you're going to make a quote that says that you aren't ready to play or that you prefer to rest the whole time.
Definitely.
He's a competitor, but
for sure.
I want to get your thoughts on this. So,
okay,
if we're looking at ways that the Celtics are going to have a fighting chance,
yes.
One of the things that occurred to me was LeBron had his career worst season this year in free throw shooting. Quietly, he's never really been, considering how superlative every other part of his game is. He's always been like a 72-75% free throw shooter. This year he was like 67, 65, something like that, 67%. Yeah. And that continued to the first round against the Pacers. Against the Raptors,
yes.
he was better. But for a guy that gets to the line as often as he does, which he gets to the line more than anybody else that's left in the playoffs. He gets to the line 10 times. I mean, he gets into the paint, over and over at will.
Yeah.
First of all, is that a strategy that you go to right off the bat in these games for the Celtics? And is that a feasible strategy against a guy that's just that strong and can pretty much do whatever he wants?
I mean, you're going to run a huge risk.
Basically, the hack of James, right? The hack of LeBron approach. You're
going to risk a lot with if you do want to go to the extreme on hacking LeBron. You could play with fire that way, certainly. But the Celtics strike me as a team that don't ever really want to end up with a lot of foul trouble. I mean, considering who you'd need to have on the floor to contain LeBron otherwise, you don't want to see like Jay Crowder ending up with 3 fouls
that's the
early.
LeBron stopper if there is one, right?
Yeah. You don't want to see Avery Bradley picking up a couple quick fouls. Isaiah Thomas obviously has been targeted in the playoffs already. If they start going at him, and I think for the Celtics, you really just want to avoid. You kind of just want to avoid that altogether. And obviously, you're going to foul LeBron because that's just going to happen. But I think targeting him specifically for the hacking strategy is a pretty risky move.
Yeah. The other thing that'll be interesting to watch is Kyrie defending Isaiah Thomas, and I think they're probably going to want to switch him off, right, as much as they can. Because Isaiah Thomas has basically toasted everyone that's tried to guard him. Kyrie Irving has gotten burned by just about everybody. But that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. All right. The last thing. For the Celtics, if we're giving them, again, assuming that they can maybe get a game or so out of this, and you don't think it's going to be a sweep, right?
No, I don't. There's at least one game in Boston that's gonna swing on an Isaiah Thomas fourth quarter run.
Sure. Who of the unsung players, the non-Isaiah Thomases, essentially, which of those unsung Celtics players is going to have a game where they either win it for themselves for Boston, or where they do enough to really swing a game?
Yeah. Well, I mean. I think some of the a guy like Jay Crowder obviously to me is not necessarily an unsung guy. He's pretty well known. At this
that's
point.
A great one, I think.
But is a guy who, if he gets 25 for you, might be able to help you steal a game
because he's liable to take 8 threes, in a quarter, right?
Larry Olynyk, or no, it's Kelly Bird, Larry O'Birdlin, Kelly Olynyk,
right?
If he ends up with 15 points in a fourth quarter, might also swing you a game. I'm not counting on it. But definitely the guy that could do that. They have a couple bench players like Amir Johnson's a guy that could step in and be a fairly versatile defender against against the Stars for the Cavaliers. And it's just like bench guys like Terry Rozier has been weirdly effective in the playoffs. And if he shows up and gives them good bench minutes, then it's a little bit less of a load on Isaiah Thomas trying to shoot them out of whenever he has to rest.
So of the two series, it sounds like you're giving the edge to of which side is going to sweep more, or more likely to sweep the Warriors over the Spurs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have to give the Warriors. I mean, thus far in the playoffs, neither one's dropped a game, but yeah, the Warriors are just my. The Warriors are my pick to sweep until they don't. This is kind of the way it always is.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I actually, Dave, I do want to shout out Dave in the comments, who makes the valid point that he's not. Don't count out Brad Stevens. Like, there's debate about his efficacy as a coach, but he has been pretty good, and he has made very good use of the players at his disposal. And I would think that some smart moves by Brad Stevens could certainly help steal one of those games that I was talking about.
Before the Spurs-Warriors game tonight, two of the best teams that we've got left, we're going to have a pretty exciting event for the worst teams in the NBA.
Yeah.
The NBA draft lottery is tonight. This is something that I think is probably pretty exciting for you. You are a draft Nick, a draft fan.
Oh yeah, I'm
mostly from your years of rooting for the Milwaukee Bucks for.
Yeah. I said this earlier on Twitter.
To not get the 12th pick in the draft every year.
I said this earlier on Twitter, I think probably yesterday. It still feels really weird to not have to worry about the Bucks in the lottery because it's happened once or twice in the last couple of years. But I'm just so used to watching lottery night and being just devastated of like, oh, the Bucks didn't move up, like whatever. Who did? This is dumb. And now that they're not there, I kind of miss it a little bit. It's weird. It's like Stockholm syndrome.
Who has the most
basketball?
Who has the most to gain tonight?
Obviously, a team like the Lakers probably has the most to win because, lottery situations being what they are. If the Lakers end up in the top three, they keep their draft pick. If they end up out of the top three due to a trade with the 76ers, they have to give it to Philadelphia. So Philly has a lot to gain if the Lakers fall out. The Lakers obviously really want that top three pick, either to take a guy or to, further the rumblings about trading for a star like Paul George, who we've talked about off air. But this really, a lot of what the Lakers are going to do going forward hinges on getting this pick. If not, they still have a bunch of young guys they can lean on, but it's going to be much harder for them to pull in stars just kind of on the reputation. I mean, you have the Lakers' reputation, but based on that team, it's going to be harder to bring max salary type stars to LA. So if they lose that pick, it's going to be rough for a little while. It's been rough for a little while in LA. It's going to be rough for a little while longer.
Yeah, what I'm personally rooting for is to see a 76ers get the top pick of their own and see the Lakers fall out of the top three. So then Philadelphia would have the 1 and the 4 potentially.
Oh boy!
And I think we would see like Sam Hinkie parades through the streets.
They would have to. I think legally they would have to reinstate Sam Hinkie.
Yeah. Trust the process; it'll pay off eventually.
Indeed.
All right. Also, on that same note, we've got Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is going to be the 76ers representative, which I don't think there's any better omen for them than to send their like 2 out of 3 years injured, very, very like the utmost potential and never quite fulfilled yet.
Might not ever fulfill. Yeah. But I am going to be watching the lottery tonight just to see. Whatever reaction Joel has, if it's elation, I'm here for it. If it's devastation, it's probably going to be pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and if the Lakers fall out of the top three and don't have a pick, then we'll be seeing a very devastated Lonzo and LeVar Ball. Which could be pretty exciting for the rest of us.
Poor LeVar.
All right, so like we said, there's the NBA draft lotteries tonight, 8 Eastern, 7 Central. After that is Spurs Warriors.
Yes, yeah, check that out.
Following on ESPN.
As soon as the envelopes are open. Flip on over, see what the Spurs can do. I
brought this ping pong ball
for luck.
Yep, to make sure we got through the show. All right. Do you want to be the one to throw it, or should I?
Hey man, it's your ping pong ball. You do what you got to do.
All right. We've got just a reminder that we are broadcasting. You can watch all the shows on Bruce Sports on YouTube, Facebook, and Spreaker. You can watch the Morning Brew at 7 a.m. and halftime at 11 a.m. And make sure you are reading our hot content on BruceSportsNet.com.
If you like weird sports, tomorrow's going to be a good day for you. So check out BruceSportsNet.com. That's going to be great. Obviously we have the whole run of college sports, baseball. We've got Tea Time, the new golf show. Check that out. Those guys are great.
Sports. We've got
all the sports. We're going to have them all.
Watch the NBA draft tonight.